The day that I'm filming this, it is 10 days until Christmas, which is crazy. I'm not going to talk about the passage of time in every video intro, but at the end of the year, it really starts getting to me. Anyway, I thought it would be a fun idea to share with you the books that are on my Christmas list this year. I do want to say ahead of time that I do not expect to get all of these books from my parents. My parents are divorced, so I need to send 2 separate lists, and I try to send like way too many books so that I won't have any idea of what books they get me, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm seriously only expecting a few books, and I don't want this video to make it seem like I'm some spoiled brat that gets like everything that she wants, or that I expect my parents to spend like thousands of dollars on me, and that is not the case. Anyway, let's just get started, shall we? The first book on my list is Lamb by Matt Hill. This is like a sci-fi horror novel. It follows a young boy named Boyd, I think is how you say it, whose father carried out like a deadly attack on his employer's office, which causes Boyd and his mother to flee to the north to try to start a new life. But there, his mother starts to kind of like slip from his grasp and go a little crazy, and he meets a friend at the landfill site at the edge of town. So I don't know much about this. It's mainly just like I really like the vibes. Like, I think the cover is cool. I'm really into like sci-fi horror right now, so I just think that this will be perfect. Honestly, I think I'm really gonna love it. Next, we have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is the pen name of Sean McGuire, who wrote the Wayward Children series, I want to say it's called, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Don't listen to me about anything. Whatever. Anyway, from what I understand, this is a story about like killer mermaids. So sign me up. Essentially, 7 years ago, there was this ship that went to do this mockumentary on these ancient sea creatures, and it went missing. And in the present day in the book, you're following a new ship that's going out with like a new crew. And as part of that crew is a girl whose sister went missing on the original ship. So they're going out to figure out what the hell happened to these people. And again, dangerous mermaids? Sounds great. Sounds like a fun time. Next, we have Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This takes place in Irish Town, I want to say 1985. It's a historical fiction. It follows our main character, Bill, who delivers coal to the local church. And while he's there, he finds this secret or discovery that makes him confront both his past and the grip that the church has on the town. I don't know what it is about this one that interests me. I think mainly the movie with Cillian Murphy. Like, I just really want to see that, so I want to read the book first. But I've also heard a lot of really good things about Claire Keegan, and I've wanted to try out one of her books before, so I thought this one would be the perfect place to start. Ooh, I didn't say that right. So I thought this one would be the perfect place to start. Then we have Sunburn by Michelle Chloe Horwath. This is another historical fiction taking place in Ireland, and it's kind of crazy because this one takes place in the 1990s, so as someone who's born in the 1990s, I don't really want to call that historical fiction, but it's true, that's what it is now. So I have to deal with that. Another passage of time thing that leaves me unsettled. Anyway, so this takes place in the early 1990s, which I was not born in, just to make it clear. And it follows our main character Lucy, who falls in love with her school friend Susanna, but she's in this very conservative town and she's afraid to come out. She's afraid of like what people will think of her, so she's kind of like dealing with these things. I've heard 1 that has like beautiful lush writing, and 2 that has a lot of religious imagery, and the idea of like religious imagery in a romance novel just like makes me want to sing. Yeah, sing. I'll go with that. Like, that just sounds absolutely amazing to me. I love religious imagery. I just think it sounds fun. So I'm totally up for this one. Maybe not fun. Maybe that's not the word. But it sounds pretty. I can say that. Next on the list is our first nonfiction, and that is Eyeliner, A Cultural History by Zara Hankier. This is a cultural history of eyeliner. Like, what else is there to say? I love makeup. I love history. So these 2 things together just seem like a really interesting thing to me. I don't know. And it said like, it talks about Cleopatra. It talks about like kind of the power of beauty and like how makeup has been used in that. I don't know. I don't really know what it's about. I'm kind of just yapping now. But I really want to read this book for some reason. It just sounds so interesting to me. Next, we have Mortar by Kaveh Akbar. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I try my best. Anyway, this book follows an orphan son of Iranian immigrants who embarks on a search that leads him to a terminally ill painter that's living out of the Brooklyn Museum. So, like, I don't know anything about this book. I got that synopsis straight off of Goodreads. What I do know is that I feel like everyone has been reading this book and absolutely loving it this year, and I just want to know. I want to know what the hype is about. I want to read it myself, and I want to have my own opinions on it. So that's why it's on the list. Next, we have Thirst by Marina Yuksuk. I think is how you say your last name. I'm so sorry. We're getting to the part of the video where I can't say anyone's name. This is a gothic literature vampire novel. This has been on my TBR for so long. Like, as soon as I heard about this book and what it was about, I wanted to read it. And that has not changed. I still desperately want to read it. Like, that's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. My interest is piqued. I need it now. Maybe not now, wait until Christmas, but I want it. Next, we have another nonfiction, and that is Sociopath, a memoir by Patrice Gagné. This is a memoir about the author's struggle with her diagnosis. She's been diagnosed as a sociopath, and kind of how that diagnosis has been misunderstood. Like, it goes deeper into it. I actually don't know anything about, like, sociopathy, personally. It's not something I've ever really learned about. I've kind of just, like, heard it used as an insult. So that's all I know. So I just think that the topic of this memoir is so fucking interesting, and I really want to know about sociopathy from a sociopath like herself. That just sounds great. Sounds amazing. Then we have There There by Tommy Orange. This is a story, I think it follows 12 different Native Americans, and they're all traveling to like this one big powwow. And throughout the book, they find out that they're connected in ways that they previously didn't know about. I don't know. I don't know much about this one either. I know that's a very short book. Did I say it's by Tommy Orange? I hope I did. It's by Tommy Orange. It's called There There. I can't remember if I said the title or the author's name, but I'm just going to keep going. Anyway, this has been on my TBR literally forever. Like, I've heard so many great things about this book, and I think he just came out with, like, I don't know if it's directly a sequel or if it's just in conversation with this book, but I think it's called Wandering Stars, and there's a lot of hype about that book this year as well. I just want to read it. I've heard that it's a beautiful book. Next is yet another nonfiction. I'm trying to get more nonfiction. I'm trying to read more nonfiction next year. It's, like, really high on my priority list. So the next book is Hell is a Very Small Place, Voices from Solitary Confinement by Jean Casella. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a look at the peculiar horrors and humiliation involved in solitary confinement. I think it's like primarily through a United States lens. I actually don't even know if like solitary confinement is widespread around the world. Like, is it? I think it is. But at least in America, it's used a lot. And I've done some research on this topic. Not like I want to read this book because it's like personal stories from people who had been in solitary confinement, and I really want to like hear their own stories and learn from them. The research that I've done has been like legal research about whether you can put someone in solitary confinement, which the answer is basically always yes, because prisons can do whatever they want to prisoners because we don't treat them like real people. And America's awful. Anyway, next book, My Husband by Maud Ventura. This is a French book about a woman who's obsessed with her husband. And I don't know why that interests me like it does, but it really does. I've followed quite a few people who have read this book, and they've all recommended it very highly, except for maybe one or two. I think it might be the cover that really pulls me in when it comes to this book, but I just want to read it so bad. I don't know why. I just do. Next on the list is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is the author... No, oh my god, that's not the name of the book. Next on the list is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden, who is the author of The Bear and the Nightingale. I've read The Bear and the Nightingale series, and I absolutely loved it. It's like this really atmospheric fantasy series set in a world that's inspired by like Russian folklore. Oh my god, I'm obsessed with it. Like, I love that series so much. And so I really want to read everything that Catherine Arden writes just because I love that so much. And this is like historical fiction, but also kind of fantasy. It takes place during World War I. And you're following a combat nurse who's trying to search for her brother. I think it's like her twin brother. And everyone thinks that he had been like lost in the trenches and has been killed, but she's convinced that he hasn't been. It's Catherine Arden. I want to read it. That's all. After that, we have another very popular book, and that is The Will of the Many by James Islington. I don't know how you say his last name. I don't know how to say any last name ever. Let's get that straight. Anyway, this is a high fantasy with a magic system that's based on like willpower. And it's kind of like hierarchical. I don't know how to say that word. It's just hitting me right now that I don't think I can say that word at all. But you know the word I'm trying to say. Hierarchical. It just sounds wrong. Am I saying it right? I don't know. Anyway, people at the bottom give their will to the people at the top, and you know what word I'm trying to use. And it also follows like a young fugitive who's in this like super elite academy, which is always a fun thing. Like, I love a school setting in fantasy. So I've just heard so much about this. I have not seen one person read this book who hasn't like absolutely loved it, which says a lot. And it has a really high rating on Goodreads as well. I'm always looking for some more fantasy to read. I think it'll be a silly fun time. Maybe not silly, but I think maybe not fun either, but I think it will be a time. The next book I have on my list is Morning in Jenin by Susan Abuhawa. This is the author of Against the Loveless World. She's a Palestinian author. And this book in particular follows a main character who's born in a refugee camp in Palestine. And before she was born, her older brother, who's just a baby at the time, was stolen by Israel. So it's kind of about like her family's struggle and their survival. I really loved Against the Loveless World. I thought that it was an amazing book that's like really underrated, and I wanted to read more by the author, so that's why I put this one on my list. Next is a book I know nothing about, and that is An Apprenticeship or the Book of Pleasures by Clarice Lispector. I went through all these books and I wrote a little synopsis of my own so that I wouldn't have to look at the Goodreads page for every single book. And I do not know what this book is about. Like, the synopsis on Goodreads is so vague. I got some gist of it maybe possibly having a love story in it, but that's all. I really don't know what this book is about at all. But I've been wanting to read something by Clarice Lispector. I've heard so many things about this author. I've heard her writing is amazing. And so I put it on my list. That's it. Then another nonfiction, Challenger, A True Story of Heroism and Disaster on the Edge of Space by Adam Higginbotham. I don't know how to say his name either. This is the story of the Challenger disaster, which took place in 1985. So if you don't know, it was like an American space shuttle that exploded or something, like, in the air, and everyone on board was killed. I actually remember my dad talking to me about this when I was little, because my dad grew up and they would have like we call it live stream this day. They just watched TV in school whenever a space shuttle went up. And he said that by the time this one came around, everyone was kind of like sick and tired of watching it. Just because they were watching it so often in school. And then all these children saw live as it like burst into flames and everyone on board died. And my dad like talked about it to this day, like how he feels so bad because like no one really cared about it and then these people's lives were lost. Or at least that's how he describes it, as someone who's like a teenager at the time. Maybe not a teenager. No, my dad was not a teenager in 85. Oh my God. He was well into his 20s, but still, you know how 20-year-old men are. So I have another book by this author. It is called, it's right here, Midnight in Chernobyl. And I bought it when I was in my Chernobyl phase, which is a totally normal phase for people to have. I watched the TV show Chernobyl and then I wanted to read every single thing I could about the topic. And I never quite finished that book. I picked it up once and DNF'd it, just as a soft DNF. I just really wasn't in the mood for it. But he seems to write really interesting nonfiction, so I want to pick that one up as well. Then we have Private Rights by Julia Armfield. This is the author of Our Wives Under the Sea, which is a book that I absolutely deeply loved. I just thought it was so moving and so weird and so great. And this book follows three sisters navigating queer love and loss. And that's kind of all I got out of the synopsis. Again, very vague, but I want to read it just because I love that first book so much. And then yet another nonfiction, Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is the story of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which is something I know nothing about, like, at all. Not even a little bit. So I want to educate myself more on the topic. I want to, like, actually be able to talk about it. And this is a really highly rated nonfiction. I'm pretty sure it made it onto the New York Times, like, best books of the century list, and I've seen so many people read it and love it, so I really wanted to also read it and love it. After that, we have Lost in the Garden by Adam Leslie. This is a folk horror. Folk horror. I used to have a speech impediment, can you tell? And it takes place in the English countryside. And from what I remember, there's like this one place in the English countryside where like it's an old wives' tale that like you should never go there. It's just a bad place. And then three girls decide to go there. And what follows is unsettling and creepy. And I just want to read it so bad. And the cover is so cute. I love the cover. I think that's what really draws me in. Then we have The Country Will Bring Us No Peace by Matthew Simard. This is a horror/thriller. If you can't tell, I'm in my horror era. This book follows a young couple that's having trouble like conceiving a child. And so they move from the city to the country for some reason. I don't know why. But the place that they move into the country, people start disappearing. And it's creepy and spooky, and I want to read it. After that, I have Pet by Catherine Chidgey, I think is how you say her name. This is a psychological thriller that follows a young girl who wants to be her teacher's, like, pet. But then there's like a thief at the school and things just like unravel from there. It probes themes of racism and misogyny. So I'm into books that probe those themes, you know? Let's get probing. Okay, let's avoid that. I feel like as these videos go on, as I like film more and more, it's just like I'm talking to myself out loud in my room, which is what I'm doing. And I just get weirder and weirder as time goes on. Anyway, the next book is The Power Broker, Robert Moses and the Fall of New York by Robert Caro. Is that an A? That's an A. Caro, I think. This is a biography of Robert Moses, who, if you don't know, was the man who shaped New York City, like not just politically, but like physically. I read a little bit of this book in a class I took in undergrad about residential segregation, and Robert Moses is like the cause of residential segregation. At least city sanctioned residential segregation in New York City. Like, he did a lot of bad stuff. But he was a very, very insanely powerful man. And because of the things he did, like, they've had long lasting repercussions in New York City and the country as a whole. So I've always wanted to read this biography, and I'm hoping that I do get this one so that I can add it to my TBR. Then a very different book, The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is a high fantasy set in a Norse-inspired setting, and it has dragons, and that's all I know. I read The Fateful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne this year, and I just loved it. I like binge read the entire series, and they're chunky books, so it really says something. And I want to read more by him, so this was the next one I put on the list. Then this book is like an odd one out for me, and it's Obit by Victoria Chang. This is a poetry collection, and I am not a poetry girl, but it just sounded so interesting that I had to put on the list. Essentially, she's creating like poetical obituaries for all the things that she's lost in her life, and how could you not want to try that? Like, the sound of that is so cool. It just really draws me in. I'm hoping I'm gonna love it. I don't have a good track record with poetry. The best I can get for poetry is being like, yeah, I liked that, but it's never like an enthusiastic, ooh, I really liked that, or I loved that. And most of the time, it's just it was okay. So I'm really hoping that this is more enthusiastic. Then we have Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, another book I have not read, but it is on my TBR, and I did really love it when I was reading it. But this one has focuses on mosses, which I think is like what she's dedicated her scientific career to, or at least like she studied them in depth. I don't know why I was like, no, don't. I don't know. But it's like a mix of science and personal reflection, and I want to read everything by this author just because the small amount that I've read of Braiding Sweetgrass I really loved. And I'm interested in mosses, honestly, like a niche little view on mosses. Like, that sounds like a fun time to me. Let's read it. Then I have Carnality by Lena Wolf. This is a literary horror that follows a Swedish writer who goes to Spain. She gets like a stipend with some money so that she can travel and work. So she goes to Spain and she meets a man in a bar who has like an extraordinary story to tell. And that's all the synopsis says. I think I was just really drawn into the cover of this book because I really love it, like so much, and I really want to read it. Next, we have Butter by Asako Yuzuki. This is a Japanese bestseller about a female gourmet chef and serial killer and the journalist who's like trying to find her. I've heard a lot about this book. Not all of it has been good. The cover also really draws me in. I think this is another like cover want. I've heard that it talks a lot about food, and some people have been very critical of the way it talks about like food and weight. So I don't know. I do want to read it though. And the very last book on the list is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This is a feminist psychological horror about the making of a female serial killer. And it follows her main character, who I'm pretty sure is like a teenager, and she becomes obsessed with the idea of eating eyeballs. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what it's about. That's what I've heard other people say, at least, before they've read it, when they were describing the synopsis. And that alone, enough to draw me in. Let's read about eating some eyeballs. I love that. That is so me. Not the eating the eyeballs part, but the reading about it. Anyway, those are all the books on my Christmas list. I'm so out of breath for some reason. Let me know what books are on your Christmas list down below. Let me know if you've heard of any of these books and if I should get any of them if my parents don't get them for me. Leave a little comment and I'll reply. And I will see you soon with another video. Goodbye.